That Christmas, I was pulling a double shift in the ER. Meanwhile, my parents and sister told my 16-year-old daughter there wasn't space for her at the dinner table. She ended up driving herself home and spending Christmas alone in a quiet house. I didn't cause a scene. I responded with action instead. By the next morning, my parents discovered a letter on their doorstep and began yelling. On Christmas Eve, I returned home just before midnight, exhausted. I'd been doing chest compressions on a man who kept insisting he was just tired, despite the fact that his skin was turning blue. It had been that kind of shift. So when I spotted Abby's boots by the front door, my first instinct was that someone might be injured. Then I saw her coat tossed over the armrest, her overnight bag still zipped up, and her body curled on the couch in that tight, uncomfortable position, like she didn't quite trust the furniture to hold her. I stood there, waiting for the logic to settle. She was supposed to be at my parents' house for their traditional Christmas Eve overnight. She had pleaded to drive herself this year, her first Christmas with a new license, proud and eager to show she could handle it. She even left early to be extra respectful. Since my husband and I were both working late, the plan made perfect sense, until it didn't. "Abby," I called out softly. Her eyes opened immediately, like she hadn't truly fallen asleep. "Hey," she said quietly. "Why are you here?" She sat up slowly. "They said there wasn't any room." I blinked. "Room? Where?" "At the table," she replied. Her voice cracked in the middle, and she tried to mask it with a shrug, but it didn't land. "They said they weren't expecting me. Too many people were already there. Grandma said she couldn't just add another chair last minute. She looked stressed, like I was making her night harder. But you arrived on time, right?" "Yeah, right on time." She gave a dry laugh. Grandma opened the door and looked at me like I'd shown up to the wrong celebration. Abby paused for a moment before continuing. "She said there wasn't a bed left either. That was the second excuse. She claimed they didn't want me driving late at night, but also didn't know where to put me. So I left." I stared at her. "Did anyone offer to take you home?" "Nope." "Did they at least let you eat?" She gave another shrug. "The table was full. Lily was in my usual seat. Grandpa was chatting with her like she was something special. No one really looked at me." Then Grandma said, "It's just a full house this year," and Aunt Janelle nodded along. So I left. Her eyes flicked toward the coffee table. "I made toast." I followed her gaze and saw it, a lone slice of toast, sitting on a paper towel. It was cold, a bit bent, with half a banana placed beside it. That was her Christmas dinner. I felt something twist in my chest, not quite rage yet, just that brittle, frozen feeling that comes before something breaks. "I wasn't that hungry anyway," she murmured. "Not really." That's when her eyes started to fill. He fought it. "God," she tried. Looked up, blinked hard, bit her lip like she could chew her way out of the emotion they made. "It seemed like I'd imposed," she whispered. Like showing up after it was planned, was rude, and then she cried, quiet and slow, like a faucet. "You can't quite turn off. I was going to bring a pie," she added. But I thought they'd have enough food already. I sat next to her, put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned in without hesitation, like she'd been holding herself up, out of spite after a while. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. "I know they don't like you," she said, but I thought she cut herself off. "You thought you were just the kid, not part of it," she nodded. "They didn't even say it meanly," she added, just like it was a practical problem. Like I was a folding chair they didn't have space for. I didn't go to bed right away. I sat in the kitchen looking at her bag, still zipped. She packed it so carefully, picked out the sweater my mom said she liked, brought. A little tin of cookies she made herself. I opened the fridge. There was nothing special in there. We hadn't planned a backup Christmas. Why would we? We trusted them. That's the part one couldn't get over. Not the cold cheese toast or the lack of food. Not even that she drove home alone in the dark. It's that they looked her in the eyes. This sweet, awkward, brave girl who showed up on time with cookies and a smile and told her with 28 people inside, "There's no room for you." They didn't mean no space. They meant not you. The following morning, my husband came home while Abby was still asleep. I explained what had happened. He stood silently for a long moment before finally asking, "So what do we do now?" I didn't answer. Not right then. But deep down, I already knew. There's a difference between turning the other cheek and turning away a 16-year-old who only wanted to feel included. They chose the latter. I didn't create a scene. I responded with action. That next morning, my parents discovered a letter waiting at their doorstep, and the shouting began. I can't quite recall the first time someone called me the weird one. Probably happened before I even understood what the word meant. When I was 6, I found a dead bird and asked if I could dissect it, not because I was trying to be creepy, but because I genuinely wanted to see how it worked. My mom slapped her palm against the kitchen counter and snapped, "Jesus, Kate, what's wrong with you?" My sister Janelle screamed and immediately told everyone I was trying to create a zombie. I ended up grounded for scaring her. That pretty much set the tone. I adored anatomy books, asked for a microscope one Christmas, and talked about blood flow during dinner. At school, I was the kid who actually raised her hand in class. And in my family, that was all it took to earn the label of show off. No one else in the family pursued college. Most didn't even finish high school on their first attempt. I was the only one studying during commercial breaks. By the time I was 12, my dad had started joking, half joking, that I wasn't really his. "To be mine," he'd say, "you'd have to like beer and hate books," then let out a chuckle. Once I overheard him arguing with my mom late at night. They thought I was asleep. He asked if she'd ever cheated on him, said he always had doubts because I didn't resemble anyone else in the family. That night, I hardly slept. I never brought it up. Still haven't. By the time we reached high school, Janelle had fully embraced her role as the golden child. She was loud, charming, and average in her grades, but a master at spinning every setback into a story people loved hearing. She could cry on cue and made a point of telling everyone she looked out for her poor, awkward sister who just didn't get jokes. She used to call me Dr. Freak in front of anyone who'd listen. When I actually became a doctor, she started calling me Dr. Moneybags. So, some progress, I guess. When I landed the full-ride scholarship, my parents barely reacted. No cheering, no embrace. My mom just asked who I thought I'd end up marrying, since guys apparently don't like women who outshine them. I told her maybe I'd marry myself. She didn't laugh. They never gave me a dime. I waited tables all through med school, took the graveyard shifts no one wanted, came home with blistered feet and burnout etched deep into my bones. But to my family, I was living the dream. They never once came to visit. Years later, after finishing my second residency, I finally secured my first stable job, the one that made me feel, for the first time, like I wasn't just trying to keep from drowning. My husband and I met during an overnight shift. Very romantic. If you find shared exhaustion romantic, and eventually moved to a place where we could afford more than instant noodles. And that's when the call started. "Can you help with the electric bill? Can you co-sign this lease? Can you talk to a doctor friend about Uncle Pete's back lump?" I did what I could, most of it without hesitation, when my parents were approaching retirement way too early, and with zero savings, I stepped in. They'd never owned a home, always rented. Bad credit, bad luck. Whatever the excuse of the year was, so I bought a modest 2-bedroom house and handed them the keys. I told them it was a gift that I'd handle the mortgage. The house is in my name, but they live there like it's theirs. Rent-free utilities covered more often than not. Medical stuff, I have insurance access. Yes, I never said no until recently, a few months ago. Janelle called Lily her daughter, the one who can do no wrong, had been accepted into a prestigious STEM summer camp. "She's got your brain," Janelle said like it was a compliment. "This could change her life." I asked how much one. $200, she said. "But it's worth it. And you." Of all people, that's where I stopped listening. Abby never went to a summer camp like that. Not because she couldn't, she just never asked. She's practical, thoughtful. She wouldn't dream of demanding that kind of money from me. Even though she could have, I told Janelle no. Politely but firmly, I said I was already covering our parents' mortgage, medical bills, and emergencies, that maybe she could apply for financial aid or a payment plan. Her tone turned fast. "Wow, must be nice to have everything and still be so stingy. She's your niece. You're just jealous because Lily's actually going places." That last one was funny, or would have been, if I hadn't heard my mom mutter something similar. A week later, when she thought I was out of earshot, apparently I was holding Lily back, just like I always held Janelle back, by being the smart one who made everyone else look bad, by existing. I didn't fight it, didn't explain, didn't justify. I just said no, and I meant it that. It was 3 weeks before Christmas. Abby was excited to go to Christmas dinner. Said she felt grown up being trusted to drive there herself. She packed an overnight bag and even wrapped little presents for the younger cousins. I told her I'd see her in the morning and reminded her to text when she arrived. She did. Everything seemed fine. Hours later, I stepped through our front door and discovered Fine had apparently been canceled. Abby looked up from the couch with a wobbly smile that said, Please pretend this isn't a disaster. She told me in the smallest voice that Grandma had murmured, no space at the table or anywhere else, even though she counted 28 chairs in use. A math problem with only one variable, her. I listened. I let her explanation thud around the room like a dropped suitcase. Then I wrapped my arms around her and let the quiet do the talking. She fell asleep, still wearing the sweater she'd picked out to impress them when the house finally settled. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the spot where her Christmas dinner should have been. I replayed every mortgage payment, every utility bill, just this once, Katie that had become forever. They hadn't run out of room. They'd run out of gratitude, and they'd used my daughter to send the memo. That was the moment the switch flipped. No more explanations. No more polite negotiations. I didn't even bother deciding if I'd act, only how soon we didn't speak much on the drive over. My husband sat beside me in silence, his hand resting lightly on my knee like a grounding. Wire not comforting exactly. Just solid present. That was enough. The morning after Christmas always has that weird, fuzzy quiet, like the world still hung over on sugar and wrapping paper. I was just hoping the house would be empty. It wasn't. There were still 2 extra cars in the driveway. I recognized one as Janelle's. The other probably belonged to whatever cousin had stayed late for leftovers. We got out. I held the envelope tight. I hadn't slept the shift. The scene with Abby, the cold dinner tray on the counter that still hadn't been cleaned up. It was all humming in the back of my brain like a blown fuse. I rang the bell. Waited. No one came. I rang again. Knocked. Nothing. Let's just leave it, my husband said gently. I stood there a second longer than nodded. We walked back toward the car. I tucked the envelope carefully against the doorframe where it wouldn't blow away. I was opening the driver's side door when I heard it. The creak of the screen, a slippered footstep. I turned. My mother stepped out, wrapped in one of those fuzzy robes she always wore during the holidays, the kind she used to brag about getting for 90% off. She bent down, picked up the envelope, opened it, and started reading. Her face went blank, then pale. Then she screamed, "Frank!" Her voice cracked like a snapped wire. "Frank, get out here. She's throwing us out." My dad appeared at the door in yesterday's clothes. What the hell? Janelle followed still in her Christmas pajamas, clutching a mug like she thought this was going to be a cozy morning. What's going on? My mom turned and pointed down the driveway like I was a stray animal that had just pissed on her porch. "You ungrateful little..." We got in the car and pulled away before I could catch the full sentence. Didn't matter. I knew the greatest hits by the time we got home. My phone was already buzzing. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again the 6th time I picked up. "How dare you?" my mom shrieked. No hello, no pause. Not even a fake concern for Abby. "You've lost your damn mind." I held the phone away from my ear. I could still hear my dad yelling in the background. "If you do this, you're no daughter of ours," he bellowed. They didn't ask why, they didn't ask what happened. They didn't even mention Abby. Not once I hung up, they kept calling. Janelle started texting. I think one message actually said, "This is going to ruin your reputation. Think of your career." Oh, honey, my patients don't care where my parents live by evening. My phone looked like it had gone through a breakup. Missed calls. 14 texts. 3 voicemails. One cousin even had the nerve to message, "Not my place, but this feels extreme. You only get one mom." I didn't answer any of them the next morning. There was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. Of course, my mother. She was standing on my porch in that same fuzzy robe, holding the eviction letter, now crumpled and damp, like she'd been squeezing it for 2 hours straight. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. She didn't wait. "You're really doing this," she hissed, "after everything we've done for you." I let that hang for a second, then I said quietly, "You mean the house I bought for you, the bills I paid, the health coverage I arranged, because your Medicare didn't cover your blood pressure meds?" She flinched for a millisecond, then she straightened eyes sharp. "We raised you. We gave you everything. You didn't even let my daughter." "Eat dinner," I said. That stopped her briefly, but she recovered fast. "Don't be dramatic. We didn't have enough chairs." "There were 28 people there," I said. "Even a neighbor," her lips pressed tight. "I didn't send that letter to be cruel," I added. "But if you think you can treat Abby like she's disposable..." "Oh, for God's sake," she snapped suddenly. Animated again. Stop acting like we're monsters. You're the one tearing your family apart over a misunderstanding, and now you're threatening your own parents. She held up the letter like it was evidence in a trial. Then, and I swear this part felt like theater, she ripped it in half, just stood there and tore it down the center, like that would somehow void the legal process there, she said. That's done now. If you want us to forgive you, you'll pay for Lily Science Camp and drop this ridiculous tantrum. She smiled like she just solved the whole thing. I didn't say anything, because that was the moment I realized they hadn't taken me seriously. Not for a second. Not when I was a kid, not when I became a doctor, not even now, to them. I was still the awkward, science-obsessed girl who should be grateful for scraps and stay in her place, the girl they resented but never truly respected, they thought a may. Wouldn't follow through, but they were wrong. So I let my mother walk off the porch muttering to herself like the hero in a tragic play, and I closed the door quietly, calmly. But in my head, I was already making the next move. My mother tore up the eviction letter, like it was a flyer for gutter cleaning right in front of me, right after accusing me of being selfish, loveless, and emotionally unstable. Then she had the nerve to smile and say, "Pay for Lily Science Camp and we'll forgive you." She said, "We'll forgive you." Like they were the victims, like turning away my daughter at Christmas was some sort of lapse in etiquette instead of cruelty. 2 mornings later, I met with a lawyer. I laid everything out. The house in my name, the mortgage I'd been paying for 7 years, the bills, the dental plan, the quiet sacrifices. He didn't flinch. "I assume you want a formal eviction," he said, like it was the weather. I nodded. The notice went out that same week. 60 days, paper, stamped, signature acquired. And this time they couldn't tear it up and pretend it didn't exist. I kept paying. The mortgage wasn't about to let my credit die for the sake of a statement. But everything else gone, utilities, cable, medical reimbursements, they got a crash course in what no support actually looks like. 2 weeks later, someone knocked on my door. It was Aunt Elaine, the good aunt, or so. I'd thought she had a tin of cookies and a rehearsed look of concern. "Kate." And she said, "I just want to talk." I let her in. I already knew why she was there. We sat in the kitchen. I poured tea. Neither of us touched it. "It just doesn't sound like you," she started. "There was throwing out your parents over a misunderstanding," she added gently. I laughed once, not kindly. I told her about the house, the bills, the Christmas Eve betrayal, how my parents had made room for 28 people, including a neighbor and 2 cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade, but not their own granddaughter. Aunt Elaine palled. "I didn't know." She said they didn't tell you. I corrected. She left like someone who couldn't unhear what they'd heard. 3 days later, I got a text I didn't understand before I do now. 1 week before the deadline, my lawyer called. "They haven't moved at all," he said. "Then we proceed," I responded. That same day, I put the house on the market, priced it fairly, not inflated. I wasn't looking to squeeze out every dollar. I just wanted to be done. A buyer made an offer quickly. Families love that neighborhood. They only had one condition. The place needed to be completely vacated. "Vacant possession required," my agent reminded me. "Understood," I said. I didn't go on the day they were removed. The new owners handled it through official legal processes. From what I heard, it wasn't pleasant. But what followed wasn't any easier. Janelle, of course, took them in, naturally. My sister has always enjoyed pretending to be the more compassionate one. She gave the cousins interviews like she was on some kind of press tour. "She's abandoning them," she told them, all because of one holiday misunderstanding. 3 weeks later, she was standing at my front door. Her eyes were bloodshot, hair tied back in a frazzled bun. "I can't do it," she said, skipping any greeting. "They're constantly bickering. Mom says the living room is too cramped. Dad complains that my kids are too loud. They won't even agree to share a bathroom. I'm losing my mind." I leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "They need a rental," she told me. "You could at least help with that, just enough to cover a deposit." "No, Janelle. You saw them turn Abby away on Christmas Eve and stood there doing nothing. That was your choice." I nodded slightly. "This is mine." She blinked, hesitated, then turned around and left without another word. A week later, she kicked them out as well. They ended up in a rental nobody would brag about. 2 small rooms, 1 space heater, and a crooked front step that leaned like a shrug. Their pensions barely covered the basics, just rent and groceries. The vacations were gone. The dinner parties, over. The anniversary cruise they'd been planning, forgotten. They started reaching out to the extended family, trying to gain sympathy. They claimed I'd abandoned them without notice, said I was unstable, cold, always had been. But by then, I had already spoken to the uncles and cousins, quietly. I sent them proof, scanned bills I had covered, a copy of the eviction letter, properly time-stamped and certified. One cousin simply replied, "Wow." Another sent a thumbs-up emoji. No one was rushing to rescue them, and I wasn't either. 2 months later, Abby and I were sitting on the porch, sipping iced tea. No plans, no pretending, just a peaceful afternoon. She said, I don't miss them. Neither did I. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message without thinking. "Hope you're proud of what you've done." I deleted it instantly. No hesitation, no reaction. "They'll probably text again," Abby said offhandedly. "They always do," I replied, "but they're not my problem anymore." And they weren't. They once said there wasn't room for Abby at their table. Now there's no room in our lives for cruelty, control, or manipulation. Fast forward 2 years. They're still living in that crumbling rental, still pointing fingers at everyone but themselves. Abby? She's thriving, studying what she loves. The money from the house sale went beyond just covering tuition. It gave her peace, and gave me a piece of closure. I don't return their calls. I don't send support. I don't lose sleep. I protected my daughter. I chose her at long last. But tell me, did I go too far or just far enough? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell.